Sarah Brennan discovered the iron chains around her wrists weighed less than the shame of being sold like cattle in Copper Ridge. The auctioneer's hammer struck wood as another mail-order bride went to the highest bidder, but when her name was called, silence fell like winter frost. The crowd parted, revealing Ezra Kane, the mountain giant with scars mapping his face like dried riverbeds. Sarah recognized him as the killer from Devil's Peak, the man mothers used to frighten children into obedience. His voice cracked like old leather when he placed his last gold nugget on the platform and claimed her. In that moment, Sarah understood she belonged to the only man the devil himself wouldn't dare visit twice. Before we dive into the story, if you love tales of redemption and unexpected love found in the harshest places, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another heart-wrenching story. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Now let's continue with the story. The auction platform creaked beneath Sarah's feet as prospectors sized her up like livestock at market. Her left leg, twisted from a childhood fall, marked her as damaged goods in their eyes. The auctioneer, a greasy man named Hobbs, cleared his throat nervously when he reached the final entry on his ledger. One bride requested specifically for the mountain man. Hobbs announced, his voice wavering. Ezra Kane seeks a wife willing to live on Devil's Peak. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Someone spat tobacco juice near the platform. Ain't no woman fool enough to warm that killer's bed, shouted a miner. Better to marry a grizzly bear. Sarah's stomach turned to lead. She'd been captured with the other mail-order brides when bandits robbed their wagon train, and now faced being sold to pay for passage she never completed. But even this fate seemed better than belonging to the man who'd killed 3 men with his bare hands. The crowd's mockery grew louder until a shadow fell across the platform. Ezra Kane emerged from behind the feed store, all 7 feet of him, moving with the quiet menace of an avalanche. Scars crisscrossed his hands and face, testament to violence that had become legend. Women grabbed their children. Men's hands drifted to their pistols. He looked directly at Sarah, and she saw something impossible in those gray eyes. Not cruelty or hunger, but a loneliness so deep it could swallow mountains. When he spoke, his voice came soft as snowfall. "She comes with me." The gold nugget he placed on the auctioneer's table was worn smooth, like he'd carried it for years, waiting. Sarah realized with cold certainty that she now belonged to the most feared man in the territory. The path up Devil's Peak should have been Sarah's death march, but Ezra's first act as her husband was to carve her a walking stick from a fallen pine branch. His massive hands, the ones that had supposedly crushed a man's windpipe, worked the wood with surprising delicacy. He noticed her limp before she'd taken 10 steps from town, though he said nothing. The stick appeared beside her when they stopped for water, smooth as silk where her palm would rest. The mountain trail wound through granite teeth and howling wind. Sarah's breathing came ragged in the thin air, her twisted legs screaming with each step. She expected Ezra to grow impatient, to reveal the monster everyone warned about. Instead, he slowed his giant stride to match her painful progress. When they reached a ravine where the bridge had washed out, he didn't ask permission before lifting her into his arms. She weighed nothing to him, this man who could supposedly tear doors from their hinges. "Your hands?" Sarah gasped, noticing fresh cuts on his palms from clearing sharp rocks from her path. "Rocks don't matter," he said simply, setting her down gently on the other side. As afternoon bled into evening, Sarah stumbled on loose shale. Her ankle twisted, sending her sprawling. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, but Ezra was already kneeling beside her. Those fearsome hands examined her foot with the practiced care of someone who understood pain intimately. He unlaced her boot slowly, checking for breaks. "Learned this from the Shoshone," he murmured, producing herbs from his pack. "They know healing better than any town doctor." While he worked, Sarah glimpsed his back through a tear in his shirt. Bullet scars made a constellation across his shoulders. Old wounds, badly healed. The town had tried to kill him more than once, she realized. Yet here he was, tending to a stranger's blisters with infinite patience. Darkness crept up the mountain like smoke. Sarah heard them before she saw them. Wolves. Yellow eyes materialized between the pines, circling. Her blood turned to ice water. She'd heard stories of what wolf packs did to travelers. Ezra stood slowly, placing himself between her and the predators. But he didn't reach for the rifle strapped to his pack. Instead, he tilted his head back and howled. The sound that came from his throat wasn't human. It was wild and mournful, speaking of territories and ancient truths. The lead wolf, gray as morning mist, stepped forward. Ezra lowered himself to one knee, extending his scarred hand. The wolf sniffed, then touched its nose to his palm before melting back into darkness with its pack. "They remember me," Ezra said quietly. "I pulled porcupine quills from the leader's paw 3 winters ago. The mountain doesn't forget kindness." Sarah stared at this giant who spoke wolf language and touched her injured foot like it was spun glass. Everything the town said about him was true. He was no ordinary man, but they'd been wrong about which kind of extraordinary he was. Ezra's cabin emerged from Devil's Peak like it had grown from the mountain itself, but nothing about it matched Sarah's expectations of a killer's lair. Hand-hewn logs fitted together with the precision of a master craftsman. Windows of real glass caught the dying light, luxuries most homes in Copper Ridge couldn't afford. The door, carved with intricate patterns of wildflowers and soaring eagles, belonged in a cathedral, not an exile's shelter. Inside, Sarah's breath caught. Shelves lined every wall, holding books she recognized from abandoned wagons along the trail. Shakespeare leaned against medical journals. Poetry collections stood beside agricultural guides. A rocking chair by the stone fireplace showed years of patient craftsmanship, each spindle turned with loving care. This wasn't the cave of a monster. It was the sanctuary of a scholar. "Your room," Ezra said, pushing open a door she hadn't noticed. Sarah stepped into impossible beauty. A bed frame dominated the space, carved with such detail she could identify each wildflower. Columbines twisted around lupines. Indian paintbrush bloomed alongside mountain roses. Months of work showed in every petal. On the small dressers sat a water basin painted with bluebirds, and hooks on the wall waited for clothes she didn't own. "You made this?" Her fingers traced the carved flowers. "Started it last spring." His voice dropped to barely audible. "When I wrote to the marriage broker, never thought anyone would come. But I wanted it ready, just in case." The walls held answers to questions she hadn't asked. Charcoal drawings covered every surface, each one a view of Copper Ridge from the mountain. Children played in the schoolyard. Women hung laundry. Men worked the mines. All drawn by someone watching life from a distance, documenting a world that had cast him out. In one corner, she found sketches of the town's children at Christmas, their faces lit by joy as they discovered packages left mysteriously on their doorsteps. "You're the one who leaves gifts," Sarah whispered. "Elizabeth Hartley's doll, the medicine that saved the blacksmith's son." Ezra turned away. Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' fears. She followed him to the main room where a map spread across the table, marked with symbols she didn't understand. Red X's marked certain houses. Dates written in careful script accompanied each mark. "The Widow Patterson," Sarah read aloud. "Fresh venison, 2 rabbits left before dawn." Another entry. "The Brennan family, flour and preserved vegetables. Youngest has consumption. Needs nutrition." Every struggling family in Copper Ridge appeared on his map. The monster they cursed by daylight fed them in darkness. The killer they wanted driven out kept their children from starving through bitter winters. "Why hide it?" Sarah asked. "They'd refuse help if they knew it came from me." Pride matters more than empty bellies in town. Sarah studied this giant, who'd built her a room of carved flowers while the world called him devil. His hands, that supposedly dealt death, had spent months creating beauty for a bride he never expected to meet. The town slept peaceful, never knowing their monster stood guard through every frozen night. The blizzard struck without mercy, sealing them inside while the world turned white. Sarah woke to Ezra's screaming. Not the roar of a monster, but the broken cry of a man trapped in memory. She found him thrashing on his bedroll by the dying fire, caught in nightmares that made his scarred face twist with anguish. "No," "There's children inside," he moaned. "Let them go. Take me instead." Sarah touched his shoulder gently. His eyes snapped open, wild with terror before recognition slowly returned. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cold. He pulled away from her touch like it burned. "You were dreaming," she said softly. "Remembering." The word came out broken. 3 years ago. The Coulter brothers, drunk on rotgut whiskey, they wanted to burn out a Shoshone family camping near their claim. Said they were stealing gold that belonged to white men. Sarah waited while wind howled against the windows. Ezra stared at the fire, lost in flames that existed 3 years past. The family had nothing, just an old grandmother, her daughter, and 2 little ones. The Coulters threw torch oil on their tent while the children slept inside. I tried talking first, then begging. When they lit the torch anyway, I had no choice. His massive hands trembled. Broke the first one's neck trying to get the torch away. The other 2 came at me with knives. I was a school teacher once, before coming west. Never wanted to hurt anyone. But those children. You saved them, and became the devil of Devil's Peak. The town didn't care about the why. Just saw 3 white men dead and a Shoshone family I wouldn't let them lynch. By morning, fever had claimed Sarah. The storm's cold had settled in her lungs, turning each breath to rattled glass. Through her delirium, she watched Ezra become someone she didn't recognize. The fearsome mountain man transformed into a gentle healer, grinding herbs the Shoshone had taught him, brewing teas that eased her breathing. For 3 days, he never left her side. When fever dreams made her call for her dead mother, crying like the child she'd once been, Ezra did something extraordinary. He sang. His voice, unused to gentleness, cracked on the high notes of an old lullaby. The same one his mother had sung before consumption took her when he was 7. "Sleep now, little sparrow, safe in your nest. Morning will come with the sun in the west. Dream of tomorrow when sorrows take flight. Mother is watching through the long night." Between verses, he told her about his life before violence marked him. How he'd taught children their letters in a small Illinois schoolhouse. How he'd come west seeking adventure and found only ways to disappoint himself. How the children he saved still visited secretly, teaching him their language and customs while the town pretended he didn't exist. When Sarah's fever finally broke, she found Ezra asleep in the chair beside her bed, her hand held carefully in his scarred fingers. 3 days without rest had left him haggard, but he'd refused to let her face the darkness alone. Sarah needed supplies from town, though Ezra offered to go instead. She insisted on facing Copper Ridge herself, refusing to hide on the mountain like shame personified. The moment she entered Morrison's general store, conversations died like flowers in frost. Women pulled their skirts aside. Men stared with mixtures of pity and disgust. "Look who's come down from the monster's bed." "Lucy Morrison stage," whispered to her sister. "Wonder if he keeps her chained like an animal." Sarah selected flour and salt, ignoring the acid comments that followed her through the aisles. She'd reached for a bolt of fabric when a hand grabbed her wrist. Luke Garrett, the sheriff's son, stood close enough that she could smell whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. "Pretty thing like you shouldn't waste yourself on that killer," Luke said, his thumb stroking her captured wrist. "I could show you what a real man feels like, not some scarred freak who murders folks. Let go." Sarah kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered. "Your monster ain't here to protect you." Luke's other hand touched her waist, fingers pressing possessively. "Maybe you need reminding what normal men can offer. Meet me behind the stables and I'll treat you better than that savage ever could." Sarah jerked away, but Luke followed, backing her against the counter. His hand raised to strike when she spat in his face. The blow never landed. Ezra filled the doorway like nightfall itself. He hadn't made a sound crossing town, but there he stood, massive and still as granite. The entire store held its breath, waiting for violence. Luke's hand still hung in the air, frozen between cowardice and pride. "Go ahead, monster," Luke taunted, though his voice shook. "Show everyone what you really are. Prove you're the killer we know." Ezra stepped forward slowly, placing himself between Sarah and Luke. The sheriff's son swung wildly, his fist connecting with Ezra's jaw. Blood spotted the floor. Luke struck again and again. Ezra didn't raise his hands. He absorbed each blow like the mountain absorbing rain, immovable and silent. "Fight back!" Luke's knuckles split against Ezra's face. "Fight me, you coward!" "No." Ezra's response came soft but firm. "I choose not to be what you need me to be." Luke's next punch went wide as tears of frustration filled his eyes. The watching townspeople saw something impossible, their devil refusing to give them hell, their monster choosing to bleed rather than become monstrous. After 6 blows that would have felled most men, Ezra still stood, blood running from his nose and lip, hands at his sides. "Sarah," he said quietly, "we should go home." She gathered their supplies while the store remained frozen in shock. As they left, Sarah heard old Martha Henley whisper to her daughter, "Maybe we've been wrong about him." Walking back up Devil's Peak, Sarah dabbed blood from Ezra's face with her handkerchief. He'd taken a beating that would have justified any retaliation, yet chose restraint. The monster of Copper Ridge had shown more humanity than the civilized folks who condemned him. Steam rose from the hidden valley like Earth's breath as Ezra led Sarah through a passage she never would have found alone. Hot springs bubbled between smooth rocks, creating pools of crystal-clear warmth in the frozen landscape. The air smelled of minerals and pine, sacred and ancient. "The Shoshone call this place the heart of the mountain," Ezra explained. "They've protected it for generations. Outsiders would destroy it, turn it into some resort for rich folks from back east." A woman emerged from the steam, her dark hair streaked with premature gray. Sarah recognized her from Ezra's description. Mourning Dove, the mother he'd saved from the Coulter brothers. 2 children peeked out from behind her skirts, their eyes bright with curiosity rather than fear. "Brother Wolf comes with his mate," Mourning Dove said in accented English, smiling at Sarah. "We wondered when you would bring her to the sacred waters." "Brother Wolf?" Sarah asked. "Their name for me," Ezra said, color rising in his scarred cheeks. "After I learned to speak with the pack." Mourning Dove's children ran to Ezra without hesitation, and he lifted them high, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. These weren't the actions of a monster, but of a beloved uncle. Mourning Dove touched Sarah's arm gently. "He comes each full moon to check our camp, brings medicine when sickness visits, teaches my children to read your language so they can survive in both worlds." Her eyes grew wet. "Without him, we would be ashes on the wind." While the children played, Mourning Dove showed Sarah the sacred pools. Each had different minerals, different purposes. One for healing wounds, another for easing old pains. The largest pool could hold several people, its waters the perfect temperature for soaking away winter's bite. "Your foot," Mourning Dove noticed Sarah's limp. "The twisted bone. These waters help such things, though they cannot cure completely. But they ease the pain." Sarah tested the water with her hand, gasping at its silky warmth. She wanted desperately to sink into that comfort, but Ezra had walked to the canyon's far end, giving her privacy. His back was turned, rigid with propriety. "He guards the entrance," Mourning Dove explained, "always watching for prospectors or soldiers who might find this place. 3 times he's led 'em away, risking himself so we keep our sacred ground." Sarah slipped into the pool, fully clothed, not caring about her dress. The heat penetrated her twisted leg, easing years of constant ache. Through the steam, she watched Ezra standing guard. This giant who'd learned an entire language to better protect people the town wanted gone. When she finally emerged, she found him crying silently, his face turned away. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong." His voice broke. "It's just, when you washed my wounds that first week." It was the first gentle touch I'd felt in 7 years. I'd forgotten people could touch without bringing pain. Sarah took his scarred hand in both of hers. "You'll never be without gentle touches again, I promise." The sacred waters had healed more than her leg. They'd shown her the truth. Ezra wasn't guarding just land. He was guarding the very concept of sanctuary itself. Spring painted Devil's Peak in wildflowers when Ezra placed a leather pouch on the table. Gold nuggets spilled across the wood, enough for passage to San Francisco, Denver, anywhere Sarah wanted to go. His scarred hands shook as he pushed the fortune toward her. "You're free," he said, unable to meet her eyes. "You never chose this life. Never chose me. I won't keep you prisoner to a bad auction day." Sarah studied the gold that could buy her escape from the mountain, from the man everyone feared. Instead of taking it, she walked to the trunk she'd brought from town. Inside lay months of secret work. A wedding quilt made from fabric scraps begged and bartered from Mourning Dove's people and the few townswomen who'd softened toward her. Each square told a story. Here, Ezra teaching Mourning Dove's children to read. There, him carving her walking stick that first day. Another showed wolves touching his outstretched hand. The center panel depicted two broken birds learning to fly together, their wings intertwined. "This is my answer," Sarah said, spreading the quilt across their table over the gold that meant nothing compared to what she offered. Ezra traced the images with trembling fingers. "You made this? For us? For our wedding bed. If you'll have me as your true wife, not just some woman you bought to save from worse fate." The giant who'd never broken beneath the town's hatred finally shattered. Tears carved rivers down his scarred face as he fell to his knees before her, this mountain of a man made small by the possibility of being loved. "Sarah, I've loved you since that day on the auction platform, when you looked at me and didn't flinch, when you saw my scars and didn't look away." His voice cracked like spring ice. "But I'm nothing. A killer. A exile. You deserve better than a monster's love." She knelt with him, taking his face in her hands. "You're not a monster. You're the man who speaks wolf language, to protect instead of destroy, who feeds hungry families in secret, who carved me a garden of flowers before ever knowing my name. You wrote back," he whispered, "to my advertisement. Before the auction?" Sarah pulled out a worn letter, his original advertisement to the marriage broker. The edges were soft from handling, certain lines traced so often the ink had faded. "I wrote back the day I read it. You said you wanted someone who could see beauty in wild things. I knew that was me. The bandits robbed our wagon before the letter could send, but I kept it. Even when they dragged us to that auction, I kept hoping somehow I'd find the man who wrote these words." "What words?" Ezra asked. Sarah read aloud. "I am not an easy man. The mountain has made me hard, and violence has marked me. But I promise to be gentle with someone who needs gentleness. I have books and warmth to offer, and hands that know how to build more than destroy. I want someone who can teach me to be human again." They held each other as sunset burned the sky to copper. Two souls who'd found their way to each other through tragedy, discovering that love could bloom even in the harshest ground. Luke Garrett returned with 5 hired guns at dawn, whiskey courage and wounded pride driving him to madness. They set fires along the tree line, black smoke rising like a declaration of war. Sarah woke to Ezra loading his rifle, his face carved from stone. "Stay inside," he ordered, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "You taught me this mountain's secrets. Let me—" "Help." Through the smoke, Luke's voice rang out. "Send out the woman, monster. She belongs with real men, not some scarred freak playing house." The hired guns spread out, torching more trees, driving Ezra and Sarah toward the cabin. One of them, a snake-eyed gunman from Cheyenne, spotted Mourning Dove's camp below. "Boss, there's savages down here. Should we clean them out too?" "Burn them all," Luke shouted. "The monster loves those heathens so much. Let him watch them cook." Something changed in Ezra's face. The gentleness Sarah knew disappeared, replaced by the man who'd killed 3 brothers with his bare hands. But instead of charging into gunfire, he turned to her. "Remember the rock formation I showed you? The one that holds snow all winter?" Sarah nodded, understanding flooding through her. They discovered it together weeks ago. Tons of snow and rock balanced perfectly, held in place by a single keystone. Ezra had made her memorize which stone to never touch. "Can you reach it without being seen?" "Through the cave passage, yes." While Ezra drew their attention with rifle fire, Sarah crawled through smoke and shadow. The hired guns laughed as they advanced, certain they had the monster cornered. Below, she could see Mourning Dove gathering her children, trapped between flames and gunmen. Sarah found the keystone, a granite wedge holding back nature's fury. She grabbed Ezra's iron pry bar and worked it loose as he'd taught her. The mountain groaned like a waking giant. "What's that sound?" one gunman asked nervously. The avalanche came like God's own judgment. Tons of snow and rock thundered down, swallowing the narrow pass completely. Not enough to kill, but enough to trap. The hired guns found themselves imprisoned behind a wall of nature's making, their horses scattered, their guns useless against granite and ice. Luke screamed threats until his voice went hoarse, trapped like a rat in the box canyon. The fire they'd set turned on them, smoke filling their stone prison. They had water from snowmelt and enough air to survive, but no way out except to wait for rescue. 3 days later, federal marshals arrived, summoned by Mourning Dove's husband who'd ridden hard to Fort Bridger. They found Luke and his men half mad from rage and fear, ready to confess to anything if someone would just free them from the mountain's grip. Marshal Thomas Hayes looked at the avalanche's precision, how it had trapped without killing. "That's some act of God," he said. "God had help," Ezra replied, his arm around Sarah. "My wife knows these mountains better than anyone." Sarah watched them lead Luke away in chains, the man who'd tried to burn out innocents now facing justice. The mountain had protected its own, just as Ezra always protected others. Marshal Hayes spread documents across Ezra's table like dealing cards of truth. Each paper bore federal seals and careful handwriting that spelled out years of murder, theft, and horror. Sarah read over Ezra's shoulder, her blood chilling with each revelation. "The Garrett family has killed 17 prospectors over 3 years," Hayes explained. "Always men traveling alone, carrying gold from successful claims. Luke and his father would befriend them in town, get them drunk, then follow them into the wilderness." Ezra's charcoal drawings lay beside the federal papers. Every detail matched. The dates he'd marked red X's on his map aligned with missing prospector reports. His artistic hobby had actually been meticulous documentation of murders everyone else missed. "You've been investigating them?" Sarah breathed. "Watching," Ezra corrected. "Drawing what I saw. Didn't know what else to do with it. Who'd believe the mountain monster over the town sheriff?" Hayes picked up one drawing showing Luke and 2 men dragging something heavy through moonlight. "This matches James Morrison's disappearance perfectly. His wife received a letter saying he'd abandoned her, but you saw different." "Saw them throw his body down Crow's Canyon. Drew it so someone might believe me someday." The marshal studied Ezra with new respect. 3 years of evidence. "You solved 17 murders from your mountain, while the town called you killer for defending an innocent family." Sheriff Garrett himself arrived in chains the next day. Cursing and spitting as marshals hauled him past the gathered townspeople, Copper Ridge stood silent, watching their protector revealed as predator. The real monster had worn a badge, while they'd feared an innocent man. "The federal judge offers you complete pardon," Hayes told Ezra. "Full restoration of your name. There's also a position. We need a territorial lawman, someone who knows these mountains and can protect travelers. The pay's good. You'd have real authority." Sarah watched Ezra consider it. The badge would mean vindication, respect, everything the town had denied him. He could walk streets without children running, buy supplies without whispers following. He looked at the badge for a long moment, then pushed it back across the table. "I choose to stay who I am. These mountains don't need another lawman. They need someone watching from above, seeing what others miss. The families I feed in secret would starve if they knew their help came from a federal badge. They accept gifts from a monster easier than charity from the government." Hayes nodded slowly. "The offer stands if you change your mind." As the marshals prepared to leave, townspeople climbed Devil's Peak for the first time. Not with torches and anger, but with shame and apple pies, quilts and apologies. They came seeking forgiveness from the man they'd tried to destroy. "We were wrong," Martha Henley spoke for them all. "You saved us from killers in our own midst while we called you devil." Ezra stood tall in his doorway, Sarah beside him. "I don't need apologies. Just remember that monsters aren't always who you think. Sometimes they're the ones pointing fingers at others." The truth had freed more than just Ezra's name. It had freed an entire town from the weight of their wrong judgment. Snow fell soft as prayer the night Sarah's labor pains began. Ezra, who'd faced down gunmen without flinching, paced outside like a caged wolf, while Mourning Dove tended his wife. His massive hands, so steady carving wood or aiming rifles, shook as he whittled a tiny cradle, each cut a prayer for safe delivery. "Brother Wolf wears out the mountain," Mourning Dove called through the door. "Your woman is strong. Trust in that strength." When the baby's first cry pierced the winter night, Ezra fell to his knees in the snow. That sound, pure and perfect, meant everything horrible in his life had led to something beautiful. Sarah had survived. Their child lived. The monster of Devil's Peak had created life instead of taking it. "Come meet your daughter," Mourning Dove said, and Ezra entered on unsteady legs. Sarah lay exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle smaller than his fears. The baby had wisps of dark hair and eyes that would surely match her mother's. When Sarah placed their daughter in his arms, Ezra held her like spun glass might hold sunlight, afraid his scarred hands would somehow mar her perfection. "She's so small," he whispered. "So breakable." "So were you once," Sarah reminded him. "And look what you became. Strong enough to protect everyone, but gentle enough to save them with kindness." Word spread down the mountain faster than snow melt. By morning, townspeople climbed Devil's Peak bearing gifts, not from fear or obligation, but from genuine joy. Children who once ran from Ezra now begged for stories on his porch, their parents trusting the man they'd once called monster. "Mr. Ezra," little Tommy Brennan tugged his sleeve, "will you teach us to read like you taught Mourning Dove's children?" The abandoned auction platform in town, where Sarah had been sold like property, had been torn down and rebuilt as something extraordinary. A schoolhouse. The town council, shamed by their past prejudice, offered it to the only man qualified to teach their children. The former Illinois schoolteacher who'd been driven to the mountain could come down and shape young minds. Ezra accepted, but on his terms. Native children would learn alongside white ones. No child would be turned away for inability to pay, and Sarah would teach beside him, her twisted leg no longer a mark of shame, but proof that strength came in many forms. As winter deepened, Ezra stood in his doorway, holding his daughter while Sarah prepared dinner. Below them, Copper Ridge sparkled with lamplight. The town that had cursed his name now blessed it. Children he'd fed in secret now called him teacher openly. The woman nobody wanted had chosen him completely. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked, joining him at the door. That every scar was worth it. Every lonely night, every curse thrown my way. It all led to this moment. To you, to her, to being human again. Their love story would be told for generations. How the gentlest hearts often bore the deepest scars. How someone's worth wasn't determined by their wounds, but by how they chose to heal. And how sometimes the person everyone fears most is the very one who'll save them all. Before you go, if this story touched your heart and reminded you that love can bloom even in the harshest ground, click the like button and subscribe to never miss another tale of redemption and unexpected love. Tomorrow's story will leave you breathless once again.